Hi everyone, Eric from Hit Subscribe here, and today I want to talk to you about doing refreshes or refurbs of blog posts. So briefly what I mean by that is the idea of going into an existing post on your blog and doing a series of things to it that aren't super and labor intensive, but can spruce it up with the idea of helping it rank better in search engines. So if you would like to learn how to take a post on your blog from ranking 11th or 9th for some kind of search term, and maybe up into that top 3, then stay tuned and let's take a look at that. Okay, so before I dive in too far to the nitty-gritty of how to do this, let's first examine the why. And I know I said right at the beginning that the why is to get you ranking higher in Google, and that's absolutely true. But I more mean the why that you might be wondering about if you're watching this and you're not familiar with the game of content marketing and ranking, which you might say, why would you need to revisit a post? Why not just write it correctly the first time? And that is a completely understandable sentiment, but it actually doesn't apply. So in order to understand this a little bit better, let's take a quick look at a metaphor. Like, you might think of a blog post as kind of like a magazine. You write a post once a week and people subscribe and they follow you and they read everything you put out. That is a great way to think about it. At least it was originally, in the sense of the word blog, which came from weblog. That is absolutely its origins. But today, in 2019, that is really not how blogs work, especially in the content marketing game. So you want to stop thinking of it as a periodical, and you want to start thinking of it as kind of a content library. So you have a blog, you have a website that covers a topic, and think of yourself as using your blog post to build a library of content around that topic. And so it almost doesn't matter in what order you produce them. You're just going to keep putting out new articles and trying to flesh out and make that library better. So using this metaphor, it stands to reason that you would go and you would find content in your library and make it a little more up to date, a little more comprehensive. Just like a library, you're always looking to bring your constituents the best possible reading material. So what I'll do is go into some specifics, I guess, because so is it in any way a reflection on the original author of the post that you're going to be refurbishing it? Completely not at all. Don't take it that way. And so I'm going to explain why not. And the first big reason is that the world changes out from under a blog post you wrote some months or years ago. And what I mean by that is, first of all, we're in the tech industry, and that industry changes really fast. So if you write a blog post about C#, they're going to come out with, the next version of C# in 6 months or whatever, and your post in 6 months might already be a little bit out of date. Like, you might want to go back in and change some things about that to reflect current reality. Another thing is that just the calendar date evolves, and what I mean by that is if you were going to go search for the best JavaScript frameworks to learn, if you saw a post entitled Best JavaScript Frameworks of 2014, you're probably not going to click on that post. So refreshes can do something like every year you go in and you change, obviously, the title of that to the current year, but you also gradually update that information to keep it current. Another thing that'll change out from under you is Google itself, the search engines. So the things they liked, so-called ranking factors of yesterday, may not be the same as today. Early in the days of search engine optimization, you did this thing called keyword stuffing, where you just said the same thing over and over again in your post, and the more you said it, the more Google liked it. Google doesn't like that anymore. So if you did a post like that 15 years ago, you should go update that post, because it will not rank anymore. The last thing that'll change out from under you is that your competitors, they will go in and they will write articles. So maybe you ranked 5 years ago with a 500-word blurb on some topic, and in the years in between, a bunch of your competitors have gone in and addressed that topic more comprehensively. So you might want to go back to your original blog post and make it longer and more detailed. So all of that is covered by the general heading of a refurbishment. So with that in mind, the world changing out from under you, there's also a sense that it's smart business. So if you write every blog post at, say, 1,000 words, you're investing a certain amount of either labor or money in that blog post. If you said, well, let's get a lot better and do a 3,000 word blog post every time, that's a much heavier investment. Now, the sad fact of the matter is everything you write isn't going to rank. You're going to write some posts that just don't rank. It's a kind of long game, and you're hoping that maybe half of them rank. So you don't want to invest a lot necessarily in posts that may not rank. So it can be a good lean business strategy to write a bunch of posts and then really invest in the ones that start to do well and are kind of promising that way. Another relatively minor but important consideration is, given the content library metaphor, you may have written content since your original post that you want to link to. So if nothing else, periodically going back through your posts and looking for opportunities to interlink, which helps with your search engine optimization, that's a good idea. And the last sort of reason that I'll get into here is that you might write a post that originally you were trying to rank for one search term or query, and maybe you did or maybe you didn't, but maybe it turns out you're actually ranking with that post for a much better keyword. If something like that happens, lean into it. So you want to go into that post and maybe tune it to adapt to the situation by which searchers are finding you. Now, that's the last thing I'll cover in terms of, I guess, the rationale for this. This video is really supposed to be more about how to do it, but I just really wanted to kind of drive home the point that refreshing blog posts is in no way an indictment of anything that you did originally. It's just a solid strategy for making sure that the posts on your blog continue to rank. All right, let's dive in now to putting together your post refurbishment checklist. And I just want to be clear that we are going to talk about compiling the checklist and not actually executing the post refurbishment, because that's a much deeper topic that would make this video super long. Now, before I proceed any further, I do want to point out one sort of procedural point. In case you're wondering, the background in my shirt and all of that is completely different. You are not imagining that. I do record these videos over the course of multiple days oftentimes, and my wife and I are digital nomads, which means that you are looking at a whole different office, because between now and when I first recorded the first bit of this video a few days ago, we've actually executed a move from Austin, Texas to Charleston, South Carolina. So hence the difference as you look around. I won't dwell on that any further. I just didn't want that to seem jarring. So let's take a look at the first aspect of putting together your post refresh checklist. All right, first up here, we are going to talk about keywords. Now, what is a keyword? Well, I will kind of show you in the broadest terms. That could be a whole topic in and of itself, so I'm not going to get into too much detail, but take a look here, and if I do, and this will become thematic throughout this episode. Hey, look, I've already Googled it, you can tell. If I say how to get a programming job without a degree, that is what's known as a keyword, kind of in industry parlance. Think of it as a question that you ask Google, whether implied or explicit. So if instead of this, I just say programming job without degree, that isn't a question, but you're always implicitly asking a question. And that's what the keyword is, your query of Google, like what are you asking here? So when we're talking about a post refurbishment, any given post that has SEO in mind is going to be optimized for at least one keyword and kind of a collection of keywords, if you will. So when we're thinking about what to do with a post, it's important to be very specific and kind of, I guess, intentional about the keyword that you're optimizing for. So I want to show you an example here. Figuring out what post a keyword or what keyword a post is optimized for is a bit of an advanced technique, but let's just say that you know. I'm going to show you something here, which is an SEO tool, and it's pointed at my site, Dead Tech, and this post in question that we're talking about here. And so what we've got going on here is this tool is actually saying, here are a bunch of keywords for which this post ranks. It ranks number one for a lot of different searches that people do. And here in the tool's estimation is your best keyword. This generally is going to mean your best keyword is going to be one that you're ranking high for, but like that also is a combination of bringing in a lot of traffic. So what is actually, in the tool's estimation, bringing the most traffic to your blog? That's your best keyword. And generally that's the one that you want to optimize for. So if we look at this blog post, how to get a programming job without a degree, I have it open here in the WordPress draft editor. And if we go down and look, it's optimized for programming job without degree. But the tool is telling me that I would be better served to optimize for how to get a programming job without a degree. So in our refurbishment checklist, this is the first thing to bear in mind. are you optimized for the best keyword? And if not, then you're going to make a note that you want to go back into this post and kind of re-optimize. You're going to retune this post to optimize for a different keyword because you know better what's working now, so you want to go with what works. That's thing number one. Now, I'm going to reopen that tab in a second because thing number two here that is going to contribute to our blog post refresh checklist, it's going to contribute a number of items potentially. So what I'm talking about here is metas. What's a meta? Well, I am glad I asked. So if we go back and search for how to get a programming job without a degree, you see all these different results in Google. And what we're talking about here is kind of in the SEO community, collectively known as the meta, if you will. And what this is, let me give you kind of a sneak peek. If I actually let me get out of here and go back to this blog post. So what this means is most people think, so like here's, right, how to get a programming job without a degree, and then over here you see how to get a programming job without a degree - dead tech. Now you'll notice that these are actually a little different, but you don't think too much of it. If you didn't think about this at all, you would just assume Google was kind of parsing the page, finding this, and maybe deciding that my blog was dead tech, so that's what it would do. But what's actually happening here is that in the page's code, there are signals that you send, and there's this concept of meta description. And so when you have the meta description and the meta title, these are actually the things that you're telling Google you want to appear in the search. And it's not just Google. You're just kind of telling the search engine, hey, I want this text to appear here. And you can also give it a title, which is how to get a programming job without a degree. So you'll notice up here, this says, hey, this whole section is brought to you by Yoast. Yoast is an SEO plugin for WordPress. So the long and short of it is here, we're being very specific about telling Google what we want in terms of what appears on this page. Now, this is going to, in rapid fire, give rise to a number of things that we put on our checklist for refreshes. Number one, look at this. So you see mine, it's kind of nice and complete, and then you've got this one below that's truncated, even if you don't have a CS ... I don't have the citations right off the top, but there have been a lot of studies and whatnot that show if you are truncated here, people are less likely to click on that. So our first item is this title truncated? If it is, put on your checklist to make it not truncated. You want to shorten it. Now, here's one that I'm actually kind of violating here. You also don't want your description to be truncated. Google, I believe, bases this on the number of pixels, but it sort of roughly translates to a character amount. If you go in here to Yoast, it will actually tell you, I believe, whether when you go to edit this meta, whether it's too long or not. Now, Yoast is telling me I'm okay, but I'm like just barely okay. And it turns out the world is truncating this. And it might even be because of the pixel thing that it wouldn't normally truncate this, but because I'm zoomed in for the video, it's truncating it. Anyway, when you're refurbishing a post, you do not want that to be truncated. Next up, that'll go in the to-do list. You see how we've got the keyword here, like it's actually being highlighted? That's deliberate. This is Google is saying to you, hey, your search term is found right here in the description. Now, if you look at some of these others, you see that not so much. Job programmer with no degree. So for this Code Mentor entry, it's kind of having to cobble that together. If Code Mentor wants to get serious about optimizing for this term and try to beat out my site dead tech, they should go back in here to the meta and actually make sure that this phrase verbatim is in there. So that's another thing to add to the list if that is not already there. Now, the last thing I'll mention is a little more advanced. I thought about putting it into the advanced section that will be at the end of this video. You want to have a call to action in your meta. Basically, you want to be seeing something like, so I have here, this is a reader question post where I look at how to get a programming job without a degree or work experience. It's not easy, but it's certainly ... We would be better served to have something here that was like, learn how to get a programming job without a degree. You want to be telling the readers what they're going to get out of this post. Now, let's use that to segue into the next thing to add to your to-do list. We're going to now dive into, and forget about the search engine, like let's go into the actual post. So here is this post. And speaking of what's in it for the reader, you want to look and see whether the post in the first paragraph or two, kind of above the fold, if you will, when a searcher clicks on this, like imagine the experience here. I'm trying to figure out how to get a programming job without a degree. So I click on this, and this here is known as the fold. It's a little zoomed in. It would probably actually go down to something like here if I weren't zoomed in. But the idea is, all things being equal, it's good to tell the user, here's what you're going to get out of reading this post. The user. You're going to tell the reader, here's what you're going to get out of reading this post. So you would like to ideally, in a refresh, get that in there. Make sure that they know what's in it for them. Now, a little bit more of a technical SEO thing. If I'm looking in here, how to get a programming job without a degree. See that? This is good. So my post doesn't need this if I were going to do a refresh on it, but if it lacked any mention of this keyword in the beginning, assuming it wouldn't be completely unnatural to do so, you would want to work that in there. It's good to have near the beginning of the post the search term, the keyword that you are looking for. So that's the post intro. Now let's consider another thing, and this general heading is going to make up the next set of things on your to-do list. And what I'm talking about here is breaking up large blocks of text. So let's go in here and, let's make this a little narrower, kind of as if I were going to be reading this on a mobile device. What you don't want are large blocks of text. That causes readers to bounce. And so I'll get into a little bit more about what that means, but as you're scrolling, you want it to be very scannable. So the first thing to ask yourself is, basically, I guess in good faith, if you will, related to the content. Like if I'm scrolling through here, are there places where this post could benefit from source code snippets, examples, screenshots? Now, this is a little bit of a strange one because this is not really a how-to post. So the answer to that is going to be no, but if this were a kind of explainer post about coding or how to do something, etc., then you could think of, like, is there a place where it would be clearer if we included a screenshot? Could I include more code here? And that, serves two purposes. It helps the reader in general, but it also breaks up the text. It makes it more scannable. So now let's zoom in on another item. So we've got two there. Could we add screenshots? Could we add code snippets? But we also want to look at, like, imagine somebody's reading this on a mobile device. What you don't want is paragraphs that take up a lot of room. That's kind of intimidating. And if you're one of the people like me for years that said, you're infringing on how literary I am, I'm like Faulkner with this blog post, and you can't stop me from writing page-long paragraphs. I get it, but like honestly, people aren't reading this for their 10th grade literature class. They're reading this while waiting at the dentist. So you want to make sure that people aren't bouncing, and nothing makes people bounce faster than walls of text. So you want to be splitting up these paragraphs. So ask yourself for your checklist, are there paragraphs that are taking up like most of a mobile screen? If so, make a note to go in and simply turn, a 5-sentence paragraph into 2 to 3 sentence paragraphs, things like that. So that's another checklist item. And then zooming out a little bit, if you look, I'm trying to look for a good example here, like this. This is not great. There are no headings here. There are no variations. It's just paragraphs. So what you want to do is make a note to go in here and add things. And it can be, we can put in an H3 or an H4 or something. We could put in a list. We could put in another screenshot, a pull quote. There are all sorts of things that you can add. But the end goal is to make it so that as you're scanning, you have kind of less text and more graphics, more things to sort of vary things up and keep the reader's attention. All right, now we are going to switch gears entirely, and we are going to talk about links. And that is going to form the basis of a number of different things that you're going to add to your to-do list. So if I look at this post, I've got a couple of internal links here. And this post actually doesn't have a ton of links, but hey, there we go. There's an outlink, some internal links. So I'm actually doing this pretty well. But this is easy enough to explain. Yep, there we go. There's another link to an outside source. So this gives us enough kind of ammo to explain what you ought to have in your post. Now, the first thing to check when you're doing a refresh, do you have any links to external sources? I'm not going to dive in. Like, this is another topic that could be its own video, but the way that Google reasons about your blog post has a lot to do with linking. There's this element of social proof, except it's kind of like search engine blog proof. Basically, think of it this way. If a really high authority site like Microsoft or Wikipedia or something links to your blog post, Google really trusts those high authority sites. So if they link to you, they're essentially telling the world, hey, this is an authoritative source. And so the search engines know enough to read those signals. And so there's this kind of game, if you will, of linking among different sites where you want to be kind of a good citizen and you want to be linking out to authoritative sites, because that kind of tells the search engines you're doing your homework and this isn't just you spewing opinions. Also, you want to get and attract inbound links because that tells the search engines that others trust you. So that's the basic premise of what we're doing here. So number one, if you're not linking out to high authority sites, it would be a good idea to put a few of those in. Just look in the post for places, that might seem like the reader could use more information, and throw in a link to something, Wikipedia, high authority sites. So those are good to have on your page because it indicates that you're participating in the linking community and doing research. Now, the next thing to check is kind of a twofold thing for your list. Number one, are you linking to any competitors? So if you're writing a blog post for Coca-Cola, are you linking to Pepsi's website? You don't want to do that. Number two, are you linking to any sites that are trying to optimize for the same term that you are? So if I go back to the search engine page here, you know what I don't want to do? I don't want to go and link to how to get your first developer job on Code Mentor, or to John Sonmez's Simple Programmer here, how to get a job without a degree. If in my number one ranking post, I start to link to their number two and number three ranking post, I'm telling Google to bump them in the search engine, basically, and I don't want to do that because I'm trying to rank for this term. So another factor about outbound links, and it wasn't relevant here, but this is an important but subtle thing. Look at your outbound links. Are you linking to non-SSL sites, like sites that don't begin with HTTPS? So, for instance, there it is. I'm linking to the Daily WTF, which is a relatively high authority site. And you'll notice there in the bottom left, this is an HTTPS. It's an SSL site. That is an increasing feature of search engine concern, is they want everybody on SSL. And so they don't like it. It's starting to look more and more spammy if you're linking to non-SSL sites. So add that to your list to check for those forms of outbound links. The next thing applies to both in and outbound links. Go through the post and make sure none of these are linking to a 404. If the Daily WTF had taken down this article without a redirect and this was a broken link, search engines do not like you linking out to broken stuff. It makes it look like this is out-of-date content. The last thing that I'll mention is not external facing, but internal facing. You want to be linking internally to articles on your own blog. And the reason for that is just as it works with outbound links, you are conferring authority onto your own internal links. So you want to be driving readers to posts on your own blog because it looks good. If I click on your blog and I'm really interested and I click on another page, that tells Google that the content is good. And it also has the authority kind of flowing throughout your site. So it's a win all around. You always want to be giving readers more opportunities to read other stuff on your blog. And finally, there is one concern here, something that you can add to your to-do list when refurbishing a post, is that I might go here and look for other sites or other posts on this site where I talk about kind of the general topic in question, how to get a programming job without a degree. So I might want to go search my own site to find other articles that might make for a good candidate to link to this post. It's a bit of a mouthful. So my goal is to find other posts on my site where I can add a link to the post that we're refreshing, because that's going to raise the post's authority a little bit more. Again, same theme, but I'm now telling the search engines, hey, here are 4 different posts on my site that link to this one. This is a good post. So that's another thing to add to your list. Now let's get into the substance angle here. So a lot of this is kind of technical SEO, the linking, breaking up text to make it more scannable. There is a substance angle here too. The first thing we want to do is look to see if anything in this post is out of date. Now, I'm not going to actually read the post, but if we have references to things from years ago, you would want to update those. You want to scan through and see if anything you're saying in here isn't true or it's obviously dated. And you want to kind of overhaul that talent. So if I had written this post, 15 years ago before programming boot camps were a thing, I might want to go in and add a section about programming boot camps. So there is this idea that you're going to go and look and think about where things have maybe modernized and then update it accordingly. Another thing that you might want to do is find anywhere in the post that you're doing something that's maybe a brief summary and then seeing if you can expand on it. So I'm saying, here's this item number 2. Let's talk about to get a remote programming or to get a programming job without a degree, you want to build something to show off. Maybe I want to come in here and kind of update that and put in some sub-headings and talk about how to go about building that thing. Anywhere you can elaborate and you feel like elaborating, that's a good idea. The search engines really like content, so the more the better. Even if you're getting the post up to 4,000 or 5,000 words, good stuff. So the next thing to bear in mind is sort of related, but it's if I go in here and here's the search, how to get a programming job without a degree. If I look at other things that are competing in the rankings here, and I start to see that these are some seriously long posts, this one looks longer than mine. The idea here is that if these competitors for you, for readers' attention in the search, are writing these 2,000-3,000 word posts and yours is 800 words, in order to be competitive, you need to add some length there. So it's good to bear in mind what your search engine competition is doing. As a corollary to that, if you see that they are longer than you, you want to add to it, and you can do so by maybe going in and seeing what they're covering. Maybe they're covering a topic that you're not. Add your take on that topic. That's generally a good practice anyway, just to kind of see what all is out there, because your goal really is to make your post have the most comprehensive content, to make it the one-stop shop for searchers to get everything they need. All right, now we are getting into the more kind of advanced and subtle territory. So these are the last few things to put on your checklist here. First up is, do you address your keyword or search query in any headings or subheadings? So going back here, am I writing a heading or subheading or what have you that says how to get a programming job? And I'm really not. So this is a little technical SEO-y. You don't want to go overboard and write headings and subheadings that don't make sense, but the idea is if you can work this term, how to get a programming job without a degree or some variant thereof, into one of your headings, that's a nice search engine factor. They look at that and they say, okay, they disproportionately weigh the text in those headings and subheadings as relevant to the search. So if you can find a natural way to work it in, put that on your list. If you can't, you don't want to force it. You don't want to be spammy. This is in 2003. Repeating the keyword over and over again doesn't work. But if you can get it in there, do it. Another pretty subtle consideration is when you go and you look at, and there isn't one here, but you probably know what I'm talking about. Maybe if I do a slightly different search, you will see these snippets where Google will come and say, so there's this people also ask, sometimes they show videos, but sometimes they actually, I'm kind of reaching here, but, there we go. I mean, this comes from the dictionary, but they'll answer the search query by taking one of the results and putting something on the page they think that answers your question. So as a subtle thing, if I, and this search doesn't lend itself super well to it, but if like I could address how to get a programming job without a degree in like a paragraph or two, then what I might want to do is write that paragraph or two kind of near the beginning and bold it and or underline it. And that's kind of answering the search query in the post. So if there's a place you have a particularly choice quote or something that really kind of captures and addresses the essence of this search query that you're answering, you might want to highlight that because you might get a featured snippet out of it for the post. And then finally, if the post has that, your to-do item is maybe highlighted or find a way to showcase it. If your post lacks that, maybe there's a way you can add it. Sort of near the beginning, probably not above the fold, but where you're kind of asking, you're telling the reader what question you're going to answer, and then maybe you go in and you want to say something like in the beginning, all right, I can answer your search query in a couple of sentences, read on for more detail, kind of the way like they do in Don't Bury the Lead newspaper fashion. Lead story here and then read on for more details. Fine line there, because if readers get everything they need after a paragraph or two, then their time on page isn't great, so it's a toss-up. Everything about this game is a toss-up. But all you can really do with the refreshes is kind of go in and just try to make the post more readable and scannable. So that's everything I wanted to cover in terms of building your checklist, and getting into the philosophy here is probably a good way to close. I do want to mention a couple of things. Number one, this isn't a cooking recipe. I'm not saying that you need to go in here and do literally every single one of these things to every post. Sometimes they won't be relevant. Sometimes the post will be good. This is kind of your arsenal of things you can do when touching up a post. Because really touching up the post is all about trying to give it a nudge. So if looking back over here at the search ranking for how to get a programming job, I don't want to search Reddit. So if I'm looking back at this, maybe I am site number 7 or whatever this is, and what I'm trying to do is bump it up a few rankings. I'm going to go in and do all these things that improve my odds, and the more of them I can do, the better, but I don't want to do anything ridiculous or schemy, because the search engines are more and more sophisticated, and really the best way to rank is to include valuable content that keeps readers on the site. So that's really your goal here. You want to give your content as good a chance as possible, but without trying to game the system. So you are genuinely here to make the content better, more scannable, etc. And while you're doing that, there are some technical things like the linking, etc. that you can improve. So that is building your post refurbishing checklist. I will most likely produce another video later where I talk about how to actually execute on that checklist. But this is already, as you can see, and thank you for sticking with me, quite a long video. So if I had done a bunch of like how to actually go and execute this thing, it would be like a 3-hour video. So thank you for watching, and you can give us a like and a subscribe and all that good stuff down below if this is interesting content to you. And we appreciate you sticking with us, and I will catch you next time.